Rick Rubeck, Royce Yudkoff, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
We're delighted to be here. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Royce, Rick, you are the co-authors of a book that is read by literally almost everyone considering buying a small business in 2024. Countless Acquiring Minds guests refer to it. It is not an exaggeration to say that it was a seminal book for an entire ecosystem. And of course, I'm referring to the HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business, which so many of us have on our very desks. And of course, that work is an offshoot of a course that you teach at Harvard Business School, HBS, on same topic. I'm thrilled to have you gentlemen here. We're going to spend the next hour getting to know the two of you and your careers and the why behind your role in the growth of entrepreneurship through acquisition. And then we'll turn our attention to ETA itself and get your thoughts on some of the theory and practice of it. Let's begin with some backstory on each of you. Would love to know about your careers before becoming professors of ETA. Rick, will you kick us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I got my PhD from the University of Rochester. The year before I got that, I left and began teaching corporate finance at MIT. And I taught at MIT for 6 or 7 years and then switched over to the Harvard Business School. I am I think my background is that of most professors. That is to say, I got a PhD around 25 years old. Maybe I was a little younger than a lot of people, but I got my PhD at a relatively early age, taught corporate finance, and continued doing that when I moved from MIT to Harvard. Just a big move across the river for me. And HBS has been a great home. It encouraged me to think about practical things as well as the research I was interested in. I enjoyed and thrived, loved teaching by the case method, still do. Did it 3 times today. It was great, at least great for me. I don't know. We'll have to ask the students if they learned anything, but I enjoyed it. And so at HBS, I taught basically everything on the corporate finance side of our business. I taught introductory corporate finance, designed some of the first direct year curriculum, taught a second-year course called Corporate Financial Management, redesigned that, taught in the private equity space, taught a course called Private Equity Finance. And that's where I met Royce. I had written a case on Royce's prior company, Abry, and that he had founded with his partner, and was intrigued by some of the things that private equity firm was doing. And so wanted to talk more about that. Got to meet Royce. Well, I think we had a pretty good relationship at the outset. Had lunch a couple times after the case was done. And then at one point, Royce decided, I think, to move away from day-to-day activities at Abry, his private equity firm that he had founded, and reached out and said he'd like to do something at HBS. And we said, well, let's do something together. And then the interesting question was, what do we do together? Now, I was a tenured professor. I could sort of do anything, but I wanted to do something in corporate finance or something that was close enough to corporate finance that I would be able to understand it. We would share a common language, common kinds of analysis, or at least we could understand the analysis that was done. We didn't want to do something that we had already done. So we could have worked more on the course on private equity finance, but that wouldn't be very new to Royce because he knew everything there was from his career in private equity. So we decided to do a course on small firms because that had not been done before. Mm-hmm. And so that's the backstory of how we got to here.
Shall I pick up on that, Rick?
Yeah, please.
My thread. I think that's exactly right. So I originally went to Harvard Business School as an MBA. It was a transformative experience for me. I left profoundly grateful for what the school taught me and pursued a career in the private sector. As Rick said, I founded a private equity firm, ran it for a quarter century. It was a marvelous experience. I'd always been keen to come back to academics and to a university setting. I didn't have the formal training that my partner Rick has. I don't have a PhD, but I did understand how the Harvard Business School taught from my years as a student. And we teamed back up. And just to pick up on Rick's thread, we pretty quickly, as we started looking at small firms, found this thread of search, which was much smaller 14 years ago, which is when Rick and I partnered up.
Actually, 15.
15 years ago when we
09.
partnered up. And Will, you'll remember this as a practitioner and a viewer of the space. It was a small thing then, but we were intrigued by it for a couple of reasons. One, we saw it as a wonderful economic opportunity for founders that wanted to retire, for young would-be entrepreneurs to become entrepreneurs, and for our students at the Harvard Business School who often come here to be general managers. It was really a wonderful career. And so we began to do research and write cases and form a course. And that led to the book and the podcast, which kind of brings you current. And it's been a wonderful, fun partnership we've had. For
Yeah, it's
15
been
years.
so much fun. It's been so much fun. And, we have a catchphrase, which is the magic is in the multiples. And for us, the magic was in the multiples. When we first looked at this space, we had written a couple cases on running small firms. But when we first looked at the acquisition of a small firm, it might have been Great Eastern Pet Foods was one of the first acquisition cases we looked at. And we said, my word, he's buying this firm at like 2.5 times EBITDA, maybe less, because EBITDA was like $100,000. He paid $700,000 in equity or something. I mean, it was really small. And how you deal with the owner, all that. We don't need to get into that for here, but it was really small. And we looked at that and said, wow, he's buying this business basically for his inventory costs. That can't ever happen again. And we started looking at the market and talking to people and finding out that in this small firm space, the multiples were really magical, that the private company, small company multiples were, what would you say, half to a third of what you had been trading when you were in the private equity business. So It was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
how is this possible?
And the quality of the businesses could be excellent. It was just a matter of small scale that made the multiple small. So our attention was arrested by that. And made us feel like it's a great opportunity.
I mean, it created so many intellectual questions. Why in the world could this market coexist? How could that happen? How could it be that a small firm with $1 million of EBITDA can sell for $4 million, where a firm in the same industry with $10 million is going to sell for $100 million at a 10 times multiple? How is that possible? And sort of digging into that led to all kinds of interesting, interesting rabbit holes, if you will, pieces of the market that we were like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder why that's like that. And then one thing led to another, to another. And so we started our course. People thought, my unit head at the time said to me when I proposed this idea, he said, Rick, you've been teaching here for a long time. You're a respected, tenured guy. You've got a good research record. So I really can't say no, but I got to tell you, I don't think you're going to get any students. And because the students don't come to Harvard Business School to learn about small business. And so if you don't get any students, you're eventually going to have to do something else. So I said, sure, I'll work in the parking lot if I need to, but let's give this a go. And we've had, since then,
we've had almost 4,000 students take the course. And at the peak of opening our doors to it, it was almost 300 a year. So that's a lot.
Yeah, and every seat is filled. So if you walk into one of our classes, and if you're ever in Boston, come on by. If you walk into one of our classes, you will find that on virtually every day, every seat is filled. So today we had our guest speaking, and when our guest got up to speak, I didn't want to take her chair. And so there was like one extra seat in the room for me to find from a student who had a cold or flu or recruiting or something. So it's it's a pretty special experience.
Well, we hear so much about how it's grown, how quickly it's grown. So was it standing room only from year one, or is that where it is? That's where it is today. But how was it in the early years?
We had 17 students the first time we offered the course.
Yeah, and it's sort of grown steadily year over year for our students. At first this seemed like a quirky, non-traditional thing for HBS grads to do. And then as other students saw prior cohorts making their way and buying companies and becoming CEOs and major owners in the company, more and more confidence grew that this was an option. And I think this thing has just accumulated year after year after year.
Right. It's not a career path. So it used to be a career path that if you said, I'm going to search, people would say, oh, you couldn't get a job? Well, you couldn't get a job. And then when the search would begin, they'd be sitting at home, in their pajamas, talking on the telephone all day. And people would say, or looking at their computers all day, and people would say, oh my word, have you thought about seeing somebody? You're clearly in psychological distress, right? Maybe you could get some therapy and then you could get a real job. Most of those people are rich now. But it was really interesting that it just wasn't very accepted. Whereas now it's viewed as a
mainstream career.
As a mainstream career.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I think there's still more people that go to consulting than buying a small firm for sure. But it's gaining.
Well, the image of the person at home in their pajamas and any onlooker saying, what the heck are you doing?
To my partner, Rick, on this, and I fully get this point on geography. For me, it's a little different, which is I think both Rick and I feel like buying your own small firm is a less risky path to entrepreneurship, surely less risky than doing a startup, but in many ways less risky than being part of a large company. We really believe that. But if you do well or don't do well in your own business, it's quite visible, at least to the entrepreneur and their family. And if you do well or don't do well inside of a large company, it's more opaque. It's just less clear, what's going on inside.
My boss is a jerk.
Yeah, my boss is a jerk. I work for this brand name company and I have some executive position. It's just less clear. And so, I feel that tension for my son, who I have great confidence in. I feel great tension for him because the outcomes are so visible as an entrepreneur. Whereas if you were embedded in McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or any, Procter & Gamble, it would just be much harder to discern. And so I feel that very keenly.
Do you think
that's interesting.
Do you think it's like the college application process? The uncertainty of your kid getting into college and which college they're going to go to, and
that it's a very public sort of mark of success.
It's a very public mark of success, and it's going to have an impact on the trajectory of their lives in a way that's highly uncertain at the time they take that first step.
So it's nervous making for the families in a way. But I think we both believe that each of our sons has made a very smart career move here.
Absolutely.
Intellectually, we believe that clearly.
I also think, at least for my son, that, and I think for yours as well, but for my son, he's been in the corporate workforce for, I don't know, not 20 years, but more than 15 years. And I think he will find a company that fits him better than the corporate jobs he's had. That's what I think. I think he's going to thrive in this role as CEO owner, but I think the uncertainty is harder. He's married, 3 kids, dog. I can't tell you how many fish, 3 cats. He's got a life, and whenever you make a change, even if it's a change much for the better, it's challenging, right?
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me about the course and why you chose to teach it is that it feels probably differentiated from maybe all the other classes at HBS, or most of them, in that there's a hint of advocacy to it. It's the two of you saying, this is an amazing thing. This is an amazing path. We recommend for the right person that you take it. there's an implied recommendation almost.
Yes.
That I assume doesn't exist in, private equity finance 101 sort of thing, which it gives it a certain character, I think.
That's a really good observation, Will, and you're right. And Rick, you've often said this, that at the Harvard Business School we teach, the major traditional professions have their own advocates. The consulting firms come up and hold recruiting dinners and talk about how great consulting is, the investment bankers, the private equity firms, but there's really no advocate for small business. And so, it's not so much that we're trying to persuade people, it's that we want to draw people's attention to this option because we truly believe it is a great option. But it's just that. It's one of many possible career options. So yes, we do kind of ring the bell and say, look at this, learn about this thoroughly, decide if it's right for you, to sort of equalize it among all the noisy choices that appear on campus. But it is certainly true. We've spent 15 years studying this area, and we really believe that if for someone who wants to be a general manager and values professional independence, this is a great path. Mm-hmm. We truly believe that.
But before we get to because I want to hear about the book, of course, and the podcast, the more recent project. But I do want to just one more question about the evolution of ETA and your role in it. Why now? Why your observation, your discovery, the magic in the multiples in 2009, 2010? Those multiples had been sitting there forever. Small businesses had been sitting there forever. Sure, the silver tsunami, but I think that gets overplayed a little bit. Why do you think only in the last 15 years has this path become so viable and so popular?
Maybe I could offer a couple of thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I'm actually
you heard that clicking sound as I was thinking. Yeah.
Well, I think there are at least a couple of things that have gone on over the last 15 years. One is I think the traditional deal of going to work for a large company has gotten worse. I think the job security has gotten worse. I think in many industries, the opportunity for advancement has gotten slower. Not all industries, some it's gotten faster. But I think just culturally, there are many people who don't feel great about being part of a large organization. And that has nothing to do with us, but I think it's in the backdrop.
It's a societal thing, and it's a generational thing, right?
Exactly. And I think a second force is that, of course, small businesses were always bought and sold. There were sort of entrepreneurs and employees who bought them, people in the local community who came in contact with an entrepreneur who needed to retire and sell. But I think what Rick and I and others, like you, Will, have done is we've drawn the attention of this market opportunity to people who never thought of this as an option. I mean, one of the experiences Rick and I have had for years is people would come to the Harvard Business School, they'd take our class, and they'd say to us, I never realized this was even possible. It never occurred to me I could buy one of the thousands and thousands of great small companies that come for sale each year. So I think there's been a group of people like you, like us, a handful of others who have kind of rung the bell and drawn attention and said, look at this.
Yeah, we did an alumni event in New York City, 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. And it was a gathering of 50 or 60 of our former students. And to tell the alumni office, it sold out like the day that they posted it. And we had students, so we imagined all the people would be from New York City. They were not. We had people from the Midwest who flew in to have a drink with us. And that was a delight. But what was even more delightful is almost every person we encountered said something like, your course changed my life. Your course changed my life. And I can tell you, you can teach corporate financial management for a lot of years before you hear that once. Never mind hear it like, I don't know how many times we heard it that evening, but it was wonderfully affirming for the path. So I think the course, we like to think that one of the things HBS does is it's transformational. It gives people a chance to see beyond what they've done, to see beyond their resume and imagine what's possible. And our class really fits into that.
Mm-hmm.
It allows people who hadn't thought about buying a small business, don't even know much about what it's about, to look at the possibilities. And, one of the things that we do is almost every class we bring in the case protagonist. And we do that for a reason. And the reason is we want the students to look at these case protagonists and say, are they taller, smarter, faster? Or could I do this? Could that be me? And most of the time, they conclude that could be me. And it may be not every one of them could be, so the guy who's the PhD in biology who buys a biological company, okay, maybe I can't do that. But today's class was somebody who bought a specialty printing business. Everybody in the class could have bought that specialty printing business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's creating a sense of the possible, and it is expanding horizons. And so I think some of that is part of it. And I think Stanford had been doing this kind of at scale for a few years before us. I hate to say that, but I think it's true. And although, people claim HBS did it first, blah, 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 but we don't need to go there. And what I think is when you find people from Harvard and Stanford doing things, it doesn't take long for people at other business schools to want to do these things. We ran a conference, 2 years ago now? 2 years ago in December for educators, people who are teaching about ETA and small business. And again, we thought, how many people are we going to get? We're not going to get very many people. And what did we have? 25, 30 people?
Mm-hmm.
30 people who are teaching this course.
All over the world.
All over the world. Teaching this course at universities all over the world. And, we probably get 2 emails a month about when are we going to do the next one.
Yeah.
Because even more people are teaching it. So it has grown. But can I say one more thing on this topic?
Yeah, please.
The other thing I think is really interesting is that a lot of the initial interest in search was around funded search.
Yep.
And Will, I know you're an advocate for unfunded search, self-funded search, unfunded search, spouse-funded search, family-funded search. I can never come up with the right word, but not investor-funded search. And I think opening that door and normalizing that has brought many people in.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who don't fit into the funded search world, because investor funded search world, perhaps because they want to do a geographic search, perhaps because they want to do an industry search, perhaps because they don't like the economic deal, perhaps because they want more independence, whatever the reason. That shoe just doesn't fit them. But now that the unfunded search opportunity is well known and publicized, I think that has both, by the way, improved the economics for the funded searchers, but it also creates another alternative or another vehicle venue for people interested in unfunded search. So I think that has also boosted the interest.
Well, that's always the fun irony to search, right? Because traditional search funds, or funded search as you're calling it, we act as if that was the original way, whereas that itself was an innovation. Self-funded search is the true original,
That's
which is you
exactly
found,
right.
you figured out a way to get a deal done.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
However you could.
Well,
Rick, you said,
that has become more mechanized and orderly and more, what's the right word? Those deals, while there's more variation in self-funded deals than there are in funded deals, they follow a familiar pattern. And not having to reinvent that pattern makes it easier on everybody.
True. The terms are standardizing somewhat, and there's expectations around it.
Exactly.
Rick, you said a couple things there that I just want to echo. The changed my life thing. I'll get that from people, and it's just incredible to hear those words directed in your direction. I mean, is there anything more gratifying? And the word you used, another word that is among my favorites, possibilities. And you used it in the context of, seeing different people on stage, and I can imagine myself and all of as doing what all these people are doing. And I think of it that way, but also when you start searching and you see all of these interesting, quirky businesses out there, all these the infinite corners and niches within the economy, it was like, it cracked open, the angels sang. It was like, wow, there are so many paths here. And it's and this is, I think, most exciting for more mid-career types. It's very easy as you get older to see the options ahead of you narrow. And this has the opposite effect. And it's just a wonderful feature, I think, of this path.
I agree entirely with every word you said. It's exactly right. It is something that expands opportunities.
Nothing is more fascinating than to sort of find these businesses that you never knew that service existed, and some entrepreneur has created a lovely business making $1.5 million a year by delivering a great service.
Or some of the businesses you never thought about as businesses, right? I'm thinking the pool business that we did a podcast on. It's like, or the gift basket business. Who'd imagine these are real businesses, right?
Real businesses, profitable businesses.
What?
Profitable businesses.
And great businesses that people are thriving at. Who'd imagine it?
Well, I kind of, my own entrepreneurial roots are in 0 to 1 entrepreneurship. So a lot of thinking about, will this idea work? And so many businesses that searchers buy, I say to myself, man, if somebody had come to me with a pitch to start that business from scratch, I would have said, never would have worked. And yet here these $1.5 million EBITDA businesses are merrily throwing off cash. So
yeah, students also often say, why should I pay 4 times for a business that I could just start? And we have lots of answers for that. Customers, ongoing, it's a going concern, all that. But one of the biggest things is that what you're getting is a business model that works.
Right.
That's what you're getting. You're getting a business model that works. You're getting customers, you're getting workers, you're getting suppliers. You're getting a business model that works. And so many 0 to 1s, as you say, they might have great technology, but they don't have a business model that works.
This is so much fun, gentlemen. Let's get to the book. We have a long way to go. So let's get to the book. How did the book happen?
Well, I would start this off, Rick, by saying that even though Rick and I teach at the Harvard Business School, we don't remotely think that entrepreneurship through acquisition is limited to people who go to the Harvard Business School. And we don't even think it's limited to people who have MBAs. And so part of the mission of the book was to reach beyond campus and present something that was very straightforward as a how-to to people who had an entrepreneurial bug, but they didn't have a big idea for 0 to 1 entrepreneurship, or they were quite reasonably worried about the risks of a plain old startup, but they wanted to be an entrepreneur, and this would lay out for them how you could do that. And so that was the idea, to reach all those people who had the potential to do this, but may or may not be in any business school. They may be people who had collected a lot of experience in their careers.
Right. And the other thing we were trying to do in the book was not sneak in, but teach a lot of the necessary economics to do this well while we were teaching the mechanics. So we have concepts of enduringly profitable businesses, recurring revenue, what to look for, why profit margin is so important. So we talk about all those bits and pieces, barriers to entry. Can service be a barrier to entry? We talk about those pieces, some of which are slippery economic concepts, but we do it in the context of practical examples with how-tos and situations and opportunities. And I think there are how-to books out there. But what ours does that I think has made it so popular is that we're providing some economic context and some bigger ideas along the way. How many copies of the book have we sold?
Well, this has shocked us, Will, because when Rick and I wrote this, we thought, Rick, Royce, how many could we sell? I mean, how many searchers are there?
I remember asking the editor. Asking the editor, what does this is a common question of mine, so I apologize, but it's what does success look like? How do I tell when I've done it well? And do you remember what they said?
I don't. I want you to remind me.
They said, well, most of these books in this series sell about 10,000 copies, right. And if you could sell 20,000 copies, you would be just fabulous.
And the book is now sold over 75,000 copies.
Wow. And I don't think there are 75,000 people who are more likely than not to go search. That's not what I think. But I think there are 75,000 people who thought about it, wonder what it's like, are interested in how small businesses work and why they work the way they do, and how to tell a good business from a bad business. And the book reaches out to that audience a lot. So it's not only the people who are interested in searching, but also the people who are interested in a little practical advice on what makes a business more or less valuable.
Mm-hmm. You realize in this world while assessing businesses to buy is that you're basically thinking like an investor in some ways.
Yeah,
exactly. So good investors, I mean, it's similar kind of matrix to apply on businesses.
That's exactly right, Will. Yeah, you're both investors and the operator, entrepreneur are looking for the same qualities in that enduringly profitable business.
Yeah. Right, but those qualities are a little bit different in a smaller business than in a big business. So if you think about, for example, barriers to entry, what limits your competition, you in big business, you tend to look for formal barriers, a patent,
a brand,
something like that. Why is it that people can't copy me, or massive scale? But like even massive scale. So, Home Depot is, there's Lowe's and Home Depot, and, so there's Burger King and McDonald's, right? So even massive scale is not a barrier to entry. And so one of the things we struggle with, for example, in this concept is what makes for a barrier to entry in a small business. It's different than in a big business. For a small business, often it's just simply providing your service at a really high level that delights your customers at a good price is a barrier to entry. They have no reason to look for somebody else. And, that's not how most people think about it as a barrier to entry. But in small business, it's probably the most significant barrier.
I think we'd agree. It's been a very good partnership with each of us contributing back and forth.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Because my perspective as an academic is that it's really important to get it as right as you can get it. So good enough isn't a concept, right? You getting it, having it be better than what existed before is not good enough. You have to have it be as good as it can be, as clear as it could be, as conceptually pristine as you can make it. So if it's a complicated concept, you have to keep working it until you get a thinner, simpler concept.
And I guess I would have to say part of my commercial experience is that it has to get done in order to be of value. Mm-hmm. So and we blend those together, right?
And it's a happy blending.
It's a happy blend
of getting
the perfectionist and the action taker.
I'm sure I'm a perfectionist. I think I kind of think about myself as a recovering perfectionist.
Okay.
We get a lot done.
I did, Rick.
Yeah.
So
and say that.
And well, the other thing that's really interesting about our relationship, and this happened we had this happen today, is that oftentimes we switch sides.
Yeah.
So
we'll debate something and passionately, and then a day later get back together and we're holding exactly the other person's views and we'll debate it that way.
And I have convinced, you said today at lunch, but you convinced me of the opposite position when we did this case last year. And I said, maybe.
Yeah.
What did you disagree about today? Do you recall? I mean, does it pertain to ETA?
It does.
We show a week to our students that we call Stephen King Week.
Oh,
and
yes.
This is a title actually Rick came up with a few years ago, where we take searches that did not turn out well and we walk those through the students, because we want them to see that ETA has a full range of outcomes. While it's on average, and in most cases, very attractive outcomes, there are situations that are less attractive. And so we take them through these unhappy stories of real life cases. And many of those are set in the trauma of either the Great Recession or COVID. And years ago when we started this, we had a discussion.
Well, pre-COVID.
Yeah, pre-COVID, we started it. We had a discussion. Well, isn't it a little narrowing to have these all set in something like the Great Recession? Won't students get confused that the message is just don't buy a business right before a recession, which is a silly lesson to teach, because how would you ever know?
And these students, so our students are between 28 and 35 or something like that, 32. So our students were basically in high school during the Great Recession.
And you made the point in that conversation of saying, no, Royce, it's not about the Great Recession. We're not teaching them to watch out for that. It's like you put a piece of equipment in a laboratory under a pressurizer and you turn up the pressure and you see when it collapses, when it implodes. And what we're doing is taking this period of great pressure and we're looking at businesses that collapsed. And then we're asking the question, what decisions did you make to put yourself in harm's way?
That
right?
sounds like such a sensible idea.
It does, doesn't it? And it's so it's not about the recession. It's about what caused your revenue and your cost structure not to work anymore. And that's the only reason we're using these. This is a high pressure experiment.
Can a business really be black swan proof?
That's a more adult version of the question I was posing to our students. And so at lunch, Royce was pointing out that no. There's, it wasn't that it be alien proof or COVID proof. We're looking at these examples because they put the businesses under stress.
What we're really looking at, in my view, at lunch was that when revenue comes under pressure, how much headroom is there in the business? That's part of what makes an enduringly profitable business.
We can reach in the classroom. We have a limited number of people we can reach with our book. I mean, we can sell more copies of the book and people should buy them. But, there's all, but the podcast is kind of the vehicle that this generation uses to learn about things. And we wanted to reach more people. So yes, an extension of the book, but this idea that we want to really get beyond just our local environment and try to expand our audience as much as possible. Because as professors, we measure success by influence. If we're influencing people's lives, decisions, giving them something new to think about, we're doing our jobs.
It's kind of why we gave it the title, Think Big, Buy Small. That's what we're trying to get people to do. Think big, buy small.
Yeah. But if we just talk to ourselves and convince ourselves that we're really smart and have good ideas,
we've already done that.
We've done that. We can continue to do that. We enjoy doing that. But
so how's it going? How do you like the format? What do you think of podcasting?
So the format that Rick and I have chosen is, like many podcasts, we bring on a guest who has taken a journey through entrepreneurship, through acquisition, and we have them lay out their journey. But what we're also trying hard to do is, at points during that description, Rick and I have a dialogue with each other to try and draw out a generalizable lesson for the people listening. Like, they'll talk about the type of business they look for, and we'll highlight why recurring revenue is so important, or why not having to reinvest in capital expenditures and inventory is so valuable and makes your EBITDA more valuable. Because we are teachers, and we want these podcasts to both be interesting and let people answer the question, could this be for me? But we also want to make sure they walk away with lessons that make them better possible searchers.
Or at least highlight the things we thought were curious or hard to understand or complicated, or when people do things that we deeply admire, we want to highlight that and say, wow, that is a really good business. We really like that business, and here's why we really like that business. Or, wow, why did you make that? How did you make that decision, and why? And then maybe dig into that decisional context in our little drop-in. So for us, it's both an extension of the book and tries to have the same flavor of the book in the sense that the book tries to do some teaching about how to, but also teaching of some of the underlying concepts. And the podcast, we're trying to elucidate some journeys, but also highlight some more general lessons along the way.
It's really wonderful. And then, of course, some of the stories are phenomenal. The story I think you ended the season with, Jared Pierce.
Yes.
He is not on my radar, and boy, am I going to get or try to get him on Acquiring Minds.
What a story. Huh? What a story.
Unbelievable.
He starts out in foster homes, eating food out of dumpsters, and ends as a multimillionaire, successful entrepreneur. It's a great story about him and about America, frankly.
I mean, it's capitalism at work, right? It's capitalism at work. He transforms the world he lives in by providing services that delight his customers.
I think one of the things you and I enjoy about these podcasts is we meet people that we really admire and we like. And they're people who are not only trying to make a career and a living, but they're trying to lead a life that is a full life for them, taking control of their careers.
So let's turn now to just a couple ETA-specific questions. Most people here are going to know the napkin math of search and why it's compelling. But I do want to just... Jared Pierce, the aforementioned guest of a recent episode of your podcast, Think Big, Buy Small, refers to a chart, Rick, that you show the class. And you were so delighted because it really sent him off in a direction. And it was basically, I haven't gotten my hands on this chart. I would like to, and I would love to link to it if possible. I don't know if.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not a problem. Just, you know what? Just email me and I'll find you a copy. This is the angst chart, right, Russ?
This is the chart that compares how much living you make as an employed person and how much income you can expect to make in entrepreneurship through acquisition.
And can you give me 30 seconds on the visual and why it moved Jared so much for those listening?
Sure. Well, that chart what it shows is cash flows through time. And what happens is that a typical HBS graduate, these are somewhat old data, but a typical HBS graduate goes out, gets a job, and they grow, I can't remember, is it 10% a year or 7% a year, something like
range.
that? Mm-hmm. Something like that. So there's a number that our career services had put out several years ago about what the 5 and 10 year wage growth was of our graduates. And so I plotted that. I took whatever the compound annual growth rate there was and grew it out. And I can't remember what the number was, but it's a number like 10 or 11 or 12 or 9 or 8, something like that. It's a relatively small number. And so you plot the HBS salary and you just draw the line of what the HBS salary looks like growing. And of course, when you get to year 10, you're kind of at 2.5 or 3 times, depending on what the growth rate is. You're at 2.5 or 3 times what you started off at. So you're making a lot of money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that looks just great. And then what I did was I superimposed on that what a searcher would make just through the waterfall. And I took the example of a relatively small business. I think it was, I'll have to look, but there's different versions of this chart floating around. I'm an academic. You can't leave anything alone. You have to tinker with everything. But I think the one he would have seen would have began with EBITDA of about $1.5 million, and then waterfall it out and see what happens to the searcher. And what you can see very visually is after the search period, and then maybe a year or two, your salary as an HBS CEO, as a CEO of a business you own, grows it's not growing very as fast as the HBS salary, but it's keeping, it's close. And then I think I had that growing at 5%. So you have, the difference in compound interest between 5% and 10 or 11 or 12, whatever the number was. But then there's this payoff at the end when you sell the business. And so there's an arresting change that you look and you just say, oh my word, I can actually do this. And if I am successful, I will create wealth that will change the course of my life and the life of my family. Because it's not inconceivable that I can buy this simple business and repay the debt and grow it at 5%. And boy, before you know it, I've accumulated several $1 million on exits. And what we're trying to communicate in the book and certainly in the podcast is the idea that you don't need a Harvard MBA to do a search effectively and to be the CEO of your own small business. It is not a prerequisite. It is helpful to have some training in finance, to have some training in HR, to have some training in sales, to have some pattern recognition that you get from the case method, for example. So I think at HBS, we do a really good job of training general managers. And there's no more general management, no more intriguing and all-consuming general management challenge than running a small business, I think. So I think at HBS, we do a really good job at preparing people for this career path. But I don't think you need the HBS education to do it. I think if you're curious, industrious, you may not know how to do proof of cash if you didn't go to HBS. But I got sad news for you. Most of our HBS students don't know how to do a proof of cash either. What they do know is that there's this thing called the proof of cash. And they know if they get the bank statements and the financial records of the company, they can sit down with Excel and figure out what a proof of cash is and learn something about the business through that activity, and that they should do that.
I agree with what Rick just said completely. And I would just add that for evidence of this, when you look at who the owners are of most small businesses in North America, they are energetic entrepreneurs who didn't go to HBS, don't have an MBA, and did the incredibly difficult job of taking that business from zero, from an idea, to an enduringly profitable, successful business that you, the searcher, are going to buy. And so if those people can do it without an MBA, then you, the searcher, who is inheriting a business with an established business model with employees and customers, ought to be able to run that business with a transition period for that seller. And that seems to me to be a proof point that you do not need an MBA to do this.
Nicely said.
Well said. All the other professional paths or what have you, it's probably still quite small. But let's say it keeps growing. Do you ever think about any of the second or third order effects of this? Is it possible that, in 20 years, this is such an established path that many, many, many thousands of people do it? I mean, I just wonder what the ceiling is here. And not just more people do it, but if there are ripple effects to people doing this path.
I don't know what the ceiling is. What I think is true is that there are a lot of small businesses out there that need some transition. What did you call it? The silver
tsunami.
Because it was the time I had here. When we started this project, I had here. You must have caused me to lose my head.
I think I did.
So I think there are lots of businesses that are available for sale and need to transition, what you call the silver tsunami. Nice phrase. I like it. I also think, though, that what we're seeing is ETA going down to smaller businesses and more interest, that are not jobs, more than a job, but maybe not a giant business, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 of cash flow instead of $1 million of cash flow. So I think when you expand the pyramid down there, there's lots of companies for sale. So I don't think there's a question about the size or the supply of businesses for sale. I think that's there. I think people love the independents. Could Harvard Business School end up graduating 100 people a year that go out and buy small businesses? Sure, why not? It could happen. Hasn't happened yet. I sort of think it might be a really good thing for our country if it did happen.
I'd just add that as more and more people search and buy businesses, whether they have MBAs or not, I would expect there'd be a knock-on effect on the quality of jobs that larger corporations offer, because whenever you get energetic, talented people saying, I could always go over here, I could always buy my own smaller firm and be my own boss, it causes a response from the other bidders for labor. They have to offer jobs that are ever better, offer more independence, offer more money. And so there's a knock-on effect if this profession continues to grow in popularity, awareness.
But Will, I must say that one of the things that I think is so interesting is how mindsets have changed. So we had a discussion today in class where our protagonist was a mid-career searcher, and she had senior jobs at a consulting firm, and then went into industry and had a senior strategic role in a Fortune 500 company. And then she went on to buy a specialty print shop. And Royce asked the question, what goal was she trying to fulfill by buying the specialty print shop? I think that was your question, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the students said, and one of the most amazing comments of the year, I will say, she said, well, she was looking for something more interesting to do. And I thought to myself, we have gone full circle. We should just stop and retire today because we're done. Because this student felt that running a print shop with $1 million of EBITDA was more interesting than being, high up in the strategy department of a Fortune 500 company. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That says that there's been a transformation in the attitude.
Last question for you, because it is rare that I have Harvard business professors on the podcast, and folks from the perch that you have your own successful careers, and then just being exposed to hundreds of hungry young people sort of at the beginnings-ish of their careers, where presumably many of them are intending to build wealth for themselves. Just about wealth and money. It's the backdrop of so much of what we do here of entrepreneurship. And so I guess I just wanted to ask if you have anything you tell students or anything you'd want to communicate to people who are younger about the pursuit of it, and so maybe to anchor my question a little bit, one extreme, the spectrum, and one extreme would be, money doesn't matter. It's all about relationships. You can't take it with you. The deathbed tests. Nobody wished they worked that extra hour for that extra dollar. Other extreme would be, no, actually building wealth is extremely important. It's status. It's what I can do for my family and my children. It's the influence I can have in America in 2024 is largely driven by how much money you have, or can be driven by how much money you have. So with that kind of crude spectrum in mind, how do you all think about it, and even in your own lives, in your own wealth building experiences?
Well, Rick, you and I grew up in families that were similar in the way that while we weren't in any way deprived, we didn't come from families with money. And so both you and I had to think about these issues of what we wanted to do with our careers and be mindful at the same time of making a living for our families. My reaction to this, but mine is, you're solving for two problems. One is to have a really fulfilling career where you metaphorically run to work every day because you like what you do, and maybe you like the people, or you like satisfying the customer, whatever the combination is, that you enjoy the work. And the second is that you want it to be work that has a reasonable chance to give you the kind of living you aspire to. Because there are lots of jobs that will satisfy one or the other. The problem with those jobs is that you end up being an unhappy person. You end up being a person who's making a lot of money but hates the work they do, or you end up with a person who...
Second heart attack, third wife.
Second heart attack, third wife kind of people. Or you end up with a career you love, but you're constantly deprived of giving your kids the things that kids need and having the kind of security that, frankly, money gives you. And so you need to look at this set of choices, which is actually fairly plentiful, of careers that deliver both. It's not all careers. Some careers offer one or the other. And it's a little bit like when you do a geographic search, you reduce the addressable market of companies, but you get other things through that. And I would assert that pool of opportunities that gives you both of those is large enough that reasonable people who are reasonably flexible can find something that brings both. Rick, what do you think about that?
Well, wonderful. I agree with everything you've just said, Royce. I would also add two other points. One is I really do believe in capitalism as a system for creating good in the world. And every time you make money, you're delighting a customer. You're making somebody better off because you were there and you sold that product. And you're selling that product and you're making some money at selling that product. That doesn't mean you're price gouging. That means that you're producing something that people value, and the customers' lives are better off because they've purchased from you, or else they wouldn't purchase from you. They're not compelled to buy you. So I think when you run your own small business and you're able to create wealth, it is a bit of a scorecard. It is telling you a little bit about how much good you've done in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't high school teachers or elementary school teachers or nurses or doctors or philosophers or English professors who are not making great money. It doesn't mean they're not contributing to the world. I'm not really trying to say that, but I'm trying to say that if you've adopted business as if you've adopted business as a career, it's not so bad to adopt money as a scorecard in part. Now, that doesn't mean you want to be a corrupt person or not follow the rules or treat your employees with dignity and your customers fairly. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you do all those things right and you make money, it just shows you're doing it. You're creating value for the world. So that's number one. The second thing I would say is that there's a lot of discussion these days about wealth creation, particularly among communities that don't have a lot of core wealth. And I would say, as Gerald Pierce points out in the podcast we did with him, there's no better way to create wealth than through the path of entrepreneurship through acquisition. Nobody cares what color the entrepreneur is. Nobody cares if they're a man or a woman or what their sexual preference is or anything else, or Democrat or Republican. Nobody cares about that. What they care about is, are you providing a product that I want to buy? Mm-hmm. And so I think it solves so many problems. I'm not sure if that's responsive to your question.
It was wonderful, both of your answers. Thank you for indulging that particular question. Is there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't ask?
Will, we're very appreciative of the contribution you make to entrepreneurship through acquisition through your podcast. It's a delight to listen to, and it offers so many lessons.
Yeah, thank you. And the only thing I would add is how much fun I have working with Royce. It's been a wonderful 15-year partnership. In some ways, we're alike. Sometimes our students get confused about which one of us
call us by the other name.
Yeah, they call us by the other name. They say to me, well, we should ask Royce about the theory because, you spent your life in industry. And I say, it's actually the other way around. But, I view those comments as great successes, actually. So it's just been a delightful partnership. I've really enjoyed it. And, I always tell my students if they want a partner, they should get a dog. And sometimes Royce takes umbrage at that comment, but it's been a wonderful partnership.
Yeah, back at you, Rick. And happy 300th birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for doing this special episode for my 300th. Rick Rubeck, Royce Yudkoff, otherwise known as Rick and Royce. The name of the book, the famous book, as if anybody needs reminding, is the HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business. And more recently, everybody go check out Think Big, Buy Small, the podcast. I've been really enjoying it. You guys are doing it in seasons. Season 1 wrapped a month or so ago. Season 2 is coming out when?
First quarter 2025.
Yeah,
First quarter
Royce says January. Rick says maybe a little later. Depends on how much snow there is in January. So we'll see.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.